They are now. Welcome back to the workshop. So on today's episode, we are going to take a look at some more in-depth gearbox technology. The episode so far has got to the stage where we have built this short gearbox, which is all the main drivetrain. You followed me along until we've got this main drivetrain together. Now we're at the stage where we need to build the differential. We've some decisions to make around the differential. In fairness, most of the decisions are actually made for us, but if you were building a gearbox like this, you would have decisions to make there too. So I want to give you a bit more of an in-depth look at differentials, how differentials work in minis, and the pros and cons of them. Before we do that, I had a good few questions on the last few videos in the comment section about different types of gear kits, the difference between a dog engagement gear kit or a straight cut synchro engagement gear kit, and maybe the difference between that and a standard gear set that would be in any normal mini that would have been factory production. So I want to go through those with you, then we'll have a look at differentials, and then as a little thank you to everybody who commented in the video a couple of episodes back about wanting to see some of the footage. You're very, very lucky. Billy managed to salvage out of our days shooting some nice little clips and has put them together in a really lovely sort of edit for you guys, about a minute long, and we're going to play that at the end of the episode. So let's first of all take a look at gear kits and what is involved in the different types of gear kits that are available. Okay, so to boil this down into the simplest that I can think of, I want to show you the three major types of gear set that's available for the Classic Mini. The first, most common type is what we would call the standard gear kit, which is a helical cut synchro engagement gear kit. So that comprises, as you are now familiar, with a main shaft, a lay shaft, and an input shaft. Input shaft takes the drive, as we said, from the engine, brings it through the lay shaft. The lay shaft then brings it through to the main shaft in various different gear ratios, and then it takes it from there and sends it out to differential. We call this the helical cut because the gears are machined on an angle. So this arrangement of teeth at an angle like this is a helical cut gear, or a helical cut gear. If you're pronouncing it in Irish English or English English, I don't know what the Americans would call it, but Cole will tell us that at some stage. These use synchro engagement, so synchros are these teeth here, and the synchro hub is the fella that connects onto here and transfers the drive between the actual shaft itself and the gear. So the gear spins freely on the shaft, it's not being driven. When the synchro hub slides across these machined ridges in the shaft, it then connects with the teeth here in the gear and it joins the gear to the main shaft. The main shaft then is connected to the differential through these splines here, and the whole shaft will turn together. So that is the most basic form of gear kit that will be available for a mini, a helical cut gear set, and that comes in many different ratios. There's about probably, I think off memory, there's at least 8, if there's not 10 different factory standard ratios that these gear kits came in, depending on what part of the country you might have been in or where you might have been. The next on for that is the straight cut gear kit that we are quite familiar with. The straight cut gear kit is very much like the helical cut gear set. The only main difference is obviously that it doesn't use gears cut on an angle. Helical cut gears, it uses straight cut gears, gears that are cut straight across the gear itself. The major difference between a straight cut gear and a helical cut gear is that a straight cut gear is actually easier to make. It's cheaper to machine. Generally speaking, you might think then, if it's cheaper to machine, has it got less strength? Well, generally speaking, because we can save money on the machining, we can put better material into the gear itself. therefore being able to make the gear itself stronger. So the weaknesses that are apparent as a result of the machining process are greatly outweighed by the strength of material that we can use. Also, because they are very easy to machine, they can be made in great numbers and we can get very much different ratios easily. Other than that, the standard straight cut gear kit available for a Mini still uses this exact same synchro hub engagement, where there's a hub that has a taper clutch and a set of dog teeth. The same sliding mechanism where one slides onto the other, catches, drives and gathers the main shaft. So much so that when you buy a straight cut gear kit, it actually uses some of the original gear kit components. For example, the main shaft is reused. The lay shaft inner is obviously reused. Even some of them use the original Mini first gear, so you don't actually get another first gear. It uses the Mini original, and also the reverse idler. If you look back on some of my other videos, you'll see those and see how they operate. So those particular gear kits don't necessarily massively change the internal structure of the gearbox. They just tend to give you slightly stronger gears with maybe more favorable ratios. So as you start to tune and performance increase an engine, generally speaking, what you do is you narrow the torque spread and you tend to bring it up the rev range. You want a gear kit that can match the performance the engine wants to put out. So if your engine, say, only revs between 2000 and 6000 RPM, then you may well need a situation where you can change your gear kit to give you, between each gear change, make sure you're in that sweet spot, in that rev range. As the engine gets more performance orientated, it's going to get to a situation where it is going to need to be even narrower rev range. So the rev range could go from, let's say, that 2000 to 6000, and it might change to 5000 or 4000 to 6000. That narrowing of the rev range is going to mean that you need a gear kit that will keep that engine in that RPM range each time you change gear. If you look at, say, for example, one of the very early gear kits in an A series Mini, an A series 1275, the RPM gap between second gear and third gear can be as much as nearly 2000 RPM. So you could, well, it's a little bit less than 2000 RPM, it's probably more like 15 or 1800. But that massive change in RPM, if you were close to your power band, could drop you out of your power band and put the engine back out of its power range, which will give you this sensation of sluggish acceleration. So straight cut gears allow us to get better gear ratios and to get those gear ratios closer. You'll have heard people mentioning times gone by, oh, we had a close ratio gearbox. All that basically means is that you will have a very long first gear to get the car moving, and then you will have a short second, third and fourth to keep the engine on the boil all the time. So when you press the brakes and you just need to go down one gear to keep that motor on the boil, you're going to be able to do that with a closer ratio gear kit. So anybody who's ever drove a Mini with a close ratio gear kit, even the Clubman GT, or the 1275 GT should I say, it would have had a much more close ratio gear kit than, say, some of the other more traditional standard gear kits. So it had that sensation or that feeling of being kept on the boil, the engine was kept alive. The next gear kit to look at is going to be dog engagement gear kit, and I want to show you there's a big difference between that and the standard synchros. So I have here on the bench a dog gear kit. There is a couple of different manufacturers of these. I'm not going to get into who or what manufacturer is better in this episode because the shop I run, I tend to build gearboxes from all the different manufacturers. I don't tend to specifically stick with one. All the different dog gear kits that are available out there have pros and cons, like pretty much anything out there. The same with the straight cut gear kits. They all have different pros and cons. Depending on the spec of the build and what you're going to do would decide that. But they all will work in the same way. So the lay shaft is, in most cases, not a one-piece unit. The lay shaft is in two parts. You have this part here, which will have fixed machined on gears, and then you'll have the back of the lay shaft, which will have a inner portion, you can see there with the split ring, and then interchangeable gears that can come off that. Basically what that allows you to change is your input gear ratio speed, which is that one, and also third gear. You can change the speed of third gear. So you've got first, second, third and input. Fourth gear is the main shaft locked up. So you've got input to the lay shaft, third gear, second gear and first gear. First and second very rarely are needed to be ever changed. Once you get the ratio right, it's what you want, but you will sometimes in certain applications want to change the ratio between the input and the main or third gear to lengthen up third gear or relax third gear. So that's one of the key differences in a dog engagement gear kit. The major key difference in a dog engagement gear kit is how gears are selected, and this is where the term a dog engagement gear kit comes from. So just like the other gear set, it comes in a main shaft, which is this one, and an input shaft, and then of course the lay shaft. And this term dog engagement is exactly where the gear slides in to make mesh. So these are our selectors. So in the last one we had a balk ring, but in a dog engagement gear kit there is no balk ring. What there is these dog teeth. So you can see these big chunks of metal that are sticking out of the gear tooth, and they in turn engage with slots in the selector. And that type of engagement is called dog engagement. So basically when you try to select gear, the two dogs come together and then drive the gear. This type of engagement allows for a very strong gear to be made, because the room that was taken up in the original gear kit for this big selection mechanism, this big selector mechanism, you can see how wide that is. It's a huge piece of material, can be quite simply just replaced with something that looks just like this. So you go from this huge big piece of material to this little small fella, and that's just as strong but only takes up that much space. What that then means is that the gears can be made much bigger. So if we have a look here at, say for example, a standard lay shaft and the lay shaft from the dog engagement gear kit, you can see the gears are nearly half as wide again. Obviously the wider you can make that gear tooth, the more torque that gear tooth can transmit, making it stronger. The second thing about dog engagement is that dog engagement can be done with far less finesse than a synchro because of these huge big dog engagement teeth. So you see the size of these dog engagement teeth. They're really big chunky lumps of material, and they're falling into these really large slots. So having so much space means that this can be done with very little finesse. If you were to do that on, say, something like a normal synchro gear, these are the dog teeth. These fine teeth here are the dog teeth. So if you mistime your gear change or don't have the RPM exactly right, the chances of breaking one of these teeth off during a gear change is very high. So when you start getting to much more performance orientated driving, for example high RPM down changes, ones that are going to take the engine from, let's say, 4,000 revs to maybe 6,000 revs in a down change, you need to have the ability to transmit that torque very quickly and also through something that is very tough. So dog engagement gear kits allow that. They do, however, take away the synchro engagement. And synchro is just simply a clutching of the two gears. There's a clutch mechanism between the two gears in the form of synchro hubs and the synchro clutches themselves. We call those either balk rings or synchro rings, depending on where you are. The reason the term balk ring comes from is what is called two balking. Two balking is where you don't have the same speed between the selector and the gear. So this is the selector and this is the gear, and if the speeds are not very closely matched, you get a thing called two balking, which is where these are not lined up with those and the gear just simply won't go in, and it has to actually turn before it'll then slip in. That's fine on a road car. If that happens on a road car, it's no big deal whatsoever. You just get a little zip on the gear lever, you hear that little crunch and you say, oops, got that wrong, press the clutch again and get the gear. If that happens on a race car, that little crunch is just the whole gear kit demolishing itself. That's generally what it is, as opposed to just that little crunch that you might get on a road car. So in a dog engagement gear kit, the chances of missing that, first of all, are massively reduced because you only actually have 4 dog teeth as opposed to maybe 36 or 38. And secondly, the spaces are much greater between the two. So the chances of actually balking the 2 gears like that are very slim. What that then means is that you tend to be able to get much more powerful down changes, and it tends to be much more positive. Now, there is wins and losses everywhere with gear kits. If you can build a gearbox with a helical cut gear kit that can withstand the power you're going to try and put through it, and also have the ability to change gear with some finesse, then that is the right gear kit to build. By far it will be better because it will be quieter, it'll be long-term more reliable, and it will give back much better performance. The straight cut gear kit, while it has that lovely ability to bring close ratio gear changes inside the grip of most people's pocket, it comes with the downside of being quite a lot more noisy. It produces a lot more metal filings which wear your engine if it goes through it, and also in general they tend to be a less refined gear change and also a less refined production gear, so they do not last nearly as long. Typically when I take apart straight cut gear kits that have done 25 or 30,000 miles, they very definitely show considerable signs of wear even if they've been well maintained. Typically you can take apart a helical cut gear kit that has been well maintained with regular oil changes, and it could have 100,000 miles on it and still be completely serviceable with some bearings and ball rings. Just take this opportunity to thank everybody who watches our videos. I know we've had a little bit of a hiatus there. Life, the universe and everything as usual gets in the way. So thank you to everybody who has waited out for our next video, and thank you very much for watching. If you're new to the channel, you are most welcome. Come hang out here in the workshop in future. To make sure you get a chance to do that, pop the subscribe button to be notified when I release new videos, and then you can come hang out here in the workshop with me. Also, don't forget, we do lives on a monthly basis, myself and another channel, the Classic Mini DIY. We put that out, I think this month it is going out on the 14th. There'll be a link to that down below. Don't forget to make sure that you set a reminder for that. Those lives are always really great fun, and I love having you guys in the shop with us during those lives, answering questions and having a chat with you. Bang the like button, it does help the channel to get out there and get more people to see it. Don't forget, hang on till the end because we do have a really cool little edit coming up for you. Billy managed to put something together and it is actually really good. I'm so impressed with it, so fair play to him. I don't know how he did it, but it is very good. Last thing I want to talk to you guys about is differentials, and then we will get that edit playing. I have here laid out on the bench a couple of different differentials. To start with is the standard differential that's in a Mini. So a standard differential has the job of bringing the power from the gearbox to the 2 front wheels. The 2 front wheels need to be able to turn at independent speeds to each other, because one wheel is going around the long arc of a radius and one wheel is going around the short arc of a radius as we turn a corner. The differential is a very clever piece of kit that allows that to happen. And if you don't know how differentials work, it is well worth having a look at. There's like 100 different videos on YouTube that explain how a differential itself actually works. I'm not going to bore you guys by spending ages talking about it here. I'm going to tell you more about the intricacies of mini differentials. So the standard differential has one pin that goes across, and it has the crown wheel, which is mounted here on the outside. So the crown wheel will be mounted here. It takes the drive and puts it through this, what's called the differential cage, and that drive then is transmitted out of the output shafts here, the output spigots, into the drive shafts and into the wheel. There'd be another one this side as well. So standard differential has one cross pin, one pin that goes across here, and it has two planets and two suns. So one going to one wheel, one going to the other, and the planets then driving them. Okay, planets because they go around the sun. If both wheels turn together, the whole arrangement goes over itself. If one wheel wants to stop and one wheel wants to turn, then what happens is the drive is put through one wheel or the other wheel, depending on it. As I said, head over and have a look at that. The next thing after that, or the next innovation in differentials for minis after that, was what is called the Salisbury Differential. And we know that this is the differential that is in our race gearbox that we're rebuilding at the moment. And the Salisbury Differential, not hugely different in its appearance. If we put it the way the other one was, we'd have the output pinions coming out of here, we'd have the ring gear on here, the whole thing turning over and over. But instead of just having one set of planetary gears, it actually has two sets. So we have one pin going this way and one pin going that way. There is an upgrade that a couple of companies sell on the standard differential called a cross pin differential, and it has just another set of pins going across here. A lot of the mini tuning shops sell a cross pin. Basically, it gives you a second set of planetary gears, makes the differential a little bit stronger, takes the pressure off that one pin and divides it across two. In the case of the Salisbury, it also has what is called limited slip. Now, what we mean by limited slip is that when the differential turns this way, there is no slip at all. Both wheels are being driven. But if I stop one wheel, all the drive will try and go through the other wheel, and it'll do that by slipping the differential. In other words, this sun wheel will be stopped and all the drive will go through this one. Or as you can see here, this sun wheel is stopped and all the drive is going through the other one that will be on this side. That is what we would term a slipping differential. In high performance applications, you might well want to limit that slip to a factor. In other words, that you will allow it to slip, but some drive will also go to the other wheel so that you don't get one wheel spinning and one wheel stopped. You want to get a more even drive across. That is done in limited slip differentials using a clutch system on the sun gear. So the sun gear in the case of the Salisbury is a gear that looks like this, completely different to the original one because it has these splines here on the back of the gear. And those splines are going to be connected to a set of clutches. Those clutches look like this. One disc is the outside, one disc is on the inside, another disc on the outside, a disc on the inside. So you'll see some of the discs have tabs on the outside and some of the discs have splines on the inside. Basically, the arrangement is such that these will go together like that. Some of those tabs are caught on the housing of the differential and some of those tabs are caught on the inside of the sun wheel. There is a beveled plate at the back, so that plate is not flat, it is beveled. And when the whole differential comes together, that bevel flattens out and tries to make all of this one. What has to happen then is there's friction now between these four plates, and that friction is the limiting of slip. So those plates are fixed into this housing, which you can see the differential housing has slots in it around the outside for those plates to fix into. So when they all line up, they fit into those slots and it all tries to drive the differential in one go. Like so. So when the pressure comes on, that sun wheel is limited against slipping because of the friction inside. So it wants to try and drive the whole plate together. If you get enough grip on the wheel, it can eventually overcome the friction in the clutch and the sun wheel can then turn independent of the housing. So the housing can be turning slowly and the sun wheel can be stopped or turning quickly, whichever it wants to do. What sets how much friction that is a two-part thing. And in my very next video, I'm going to show you how a Salisbury differential is set up. In other words, the machining that needs to be done, the problems to look for, and where potential improvements can be made to make the Salisbury differential better for either track or rally, or even for road, track day, or hill climb purposes. So I'll show you how one of those differentials can be modified and made better. The last differential I have on the table here is what they call a Evo limited slip differential. This is a much more modern version of the Salisbury. It has much more modern plates, many more of them, and a different clutching system inside. In another video, if people are interested, I can do a real in-depth look at one of these differentials versus, say, one of the Salisbury differentials, and where the improvements have come from and where those differentials are better. Other than that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sign off here. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that video. If you did, don't forget to put some comments in the comment section below. We had a trainee cameraman on today, so if there's a bit of shaking, a bit of blur earlier on, you can thank Dara for that. I'm only joking, he did a great job. We're going to flick on a little edit now, as I said, of some of our exploits out on track recently. More of it is getting there than it is actually being on track, but look, you guys said you wanted to see some of the behind the scenes, so we've put that little edit together for you. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you guys on the next one.